When Iron Man snaps, RDJ and Jimmy Kimmel's explosive debate. Section 1. What happens when Hollywood's most beloved superhero meets late-night television's most notorious provocateur? What happens when carefully crafted public personas collide with raw, unfiltered truth? Tonight, we're diving deep into one of the most shocking confrontations ever captured on live television, a moment that left audiences stunned and revealed the dark underbelly of celebrity culture. This isn't just another late-night interview gone wrong. This is the night Robert Downey Jr. finally said what everyone was thinking about Jimmy Kimmel, and it got ugly fast. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because you're going to want to discuss this explosive encounter with fellow viewers. The Tonight Show studio buzzed with its usual pre-show energy, but something felt different that evening. Robert Downey Jr. sat in the green room, adjusting his perfectly tailored suit jacket, his jaw set in a way that suggested this wasn't going to be another routine promotional appearance. He had agreed to come on Jimmy Kimmel Live to discuss his latest project, but insiders later revealed he had other plans entirely. Plans that would turn a simple interview into television history. Jimmy Kimmel, meanwhile, was in his element, cracking jokes with his writing staff and reviewing his prepared questions. Known for his sharp wit and sometimes ruthless approach to celebrity interviews, Kimmel had built his career on making stars uncomfortable, pushing boundaries that other hosts wouldn't dare cross. He relished the opportunity to sit across from Hollywood royalty, especially someone as quick and intelligent as Downey Jr. What he didn't anticipate was that his guest had done his homework too. As the cameras rolled and the familiar theme music faded, Kimmel launched into his opening monologue with his trademark smirk. The audience was primed for entertainment, expecting the usual banter between a beloved actor and their favorite late-night host. But from the moment Downey Jr. walked onto that stage, something was off. His smile seemed forced, his wave to the audience perfunctory. He settled into the guest chair with the calculated precision of someone preparing for battle, not banter. "Robert Downey Jr., everybody," Kimmel announced with his usual enthusiasm. But even he seemed to sense the unusual tension radiating from his guest. "Great to have you back on the show. You look fantastic, as always." Downey Jr. nodded politely, his hands clasped in his lap. "Thanks for having me, Jimmy. Always a pleasure to be here in your domain." The word choice was deliberate, pointed. Domain, not studio, not show, but domain, suggesting ownership, territory, power. Kimmel either missed the subtle dig or chose to ignore it, launching into his first question about Downey Jr.'s upcoming film projects. But the actor's responses were clipped, professional to the point of coldness. Where audiences expected the usual charm and wit that made Robert Downey Jr. one of Hollywood's most engaging interview subjects, they instead witnessed a man clearly operating with a different agenda. "You seem a bit serious tonight," Kimmel observed, leaning back in his chair with that practiced, casual pose that suggested he was just making conversation. "Everything okay? Did someone steal your coffee this morning?" The question drew a few chuckles from the audience, but Downey Jr. didn't even crack a smile. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes fixed on Kimmel with an intensity that made the host shift uncomfortably in his seat. "Actually, Jimmy, I wanted to talk about something else tonight," Downey Jr. said, his voice carrying a weight that immediately changed the atmosphere in the studio. "I wanted to talk about responsibility." Kimmel's eyebrows shot up, his media-trained instincts kicking in as he sensed potential controversy brewing. This wasn't in the pre-interview notes. This wasn't what they had discussed backstage. But live, television was his playground, and he had navigated unexpected moments before. "Responsibility?" Kimmel repeated, trying to maintain his light-hearted tone. "That's a heavy topic for late-night TV. Are we talking about your responsibility as Iron Man or something more personal?" I'm talking about your responsibility, Jimmy, Downey Jr. replied, and the studio fell into a silence so complete that the hum of the cameras seemed deafening. Your responsibility as someone with a platform, with influence, with the ability to shape public opinion. The audience sensed something significant was happening, but they weren't sure what. The usual rhythm of late-night television, the comfortable, back and forth between host and guest, had been completely disrupted. Kimmel's smile faltered for just a moment before he recovered, but that moment was enough to reveal his genuine surprise. My responsibility? Kimmel asked, attempting to inject some humor into the situation. I tell jokes for a living, Robert. I think you might be giving me a bit too much credit here. But Downey Jr. wasn't backing down. If anything, Kimmel's dismissive response seemed to fuel his determination. Do you really believe that, Jimmy? Do you really think that what you do here night after night is just telling jokes? The question hung in the air, like a challenge, and suddenly the comfortable late-night talk show format felt inadequate to contain what was happening between these two men. Kimmel found himself in unfamiliar territory, facing a guest who had clearly come prepared for a different kind of conversation entirely. I mean, yeah, pretty much, Kimmel replied, but his usual confidence was beginning to waver. I make people laugh. I interview celebrities. I comment on current events. It's entertainment, Robert. It's not brain surgery. Downey Jr. smiled then, but it wasn't a warm expression. It was the smile of someone who had just heard exactly what they expected to hear, confirmation of something they already believed. Entertainment, he repeated slowly, as if tasting the word. Is that what you call it when you mock people who can't fight back? When you use your platform to tear down individuals who don't have the resources or the reach to defend themselves? When you contribute to a culture of cynicism and cruelty disguised as humor? The studio audience was completely silent now, sensing that they were witnessing something unprecedented. This wasn't a friendly disagreement or a playful debate. This was a confrontation, and it was happening live on national television. Kimmel's defensive mechanisms kicked in, his years of experience telling him to deflect with humor, to turn this uncomfortable moment into something manageable. Wow, okay, someone's been reading philosophy books, he said with a forced laugh. Are you sure you're not confusing me with someone else? I think I'm pretty harmless, all things considered. But Downey Jr. was just getting started, and Kimmel's attempt at deflection only seemed to prove his point about the host's inability to engage seriously with criticism. Harmless, Downey Jr. repeated, his voice carrying a dangerous edge that made several audience members lean forward in their seats. Jimmy, do you remember Sarah Chen? Kimmel's face went blank for a moment, clearly caught off guard by the specific reference. Sarah Chen? I'm not sure I follow. Dimbu, the young actress who appeared on your show 3 months ago to promote her first major film role, Downey Jr. continued, his tone measured but relentless. You spent 10 minutes mocking her accent, making jokes about her English, turning what should have been a career-defining moment into a humiliation fest for your audience's entertainment. The color began to drain from Kimmel's face as he realized where this was heading. Now wait a minute, that was just light-hearted fun. She was laughing along. She got the joke. Was she laughing, Jimmy? Or was she a 22-year-old actress who had worked her entire life for that moment, sitting in front of millions of viewers, realizing that instead of discussing her craft or her journey, she was being turned into a punchline? Downey Jr.'s voice remained steady, but the passion behind his words was unmistakable. Because I spoke to Sarah after that interview. I know what that experience did to her confidence, to her career prospects, to her mental health. Kimmel shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his usual arsenal of deflections suddenly feeling inadequate. Look, Robert, if she felt bad about the interview, that wasn't my intention. Comedy is subjective, and sometimes things don't land the way you Hope they will. Your intention? Downey Jr. leaned forward, his eyes never leaving Kimmel's face. That's interesting, because your writers spent considerable time crafting those jokes. Your production team researched her background specifically to find material to mock. This wasn't spontaneous comedy, Jimmy. This was calculated cruelty with a laugh track. The audience was riveted now, understanding that they were witnessing something far more significant than a typical celebrity interview. Some looked uncomfortable, others appeared fascinated, but all were completely silent as they watched one of Hollywood's biggest stars systematically dismantle one of television's most powerful hosts. Kimmel tried to regain control of the situation, falling back on his practiced media persona. I think you're being a bit dramatic here, Robert. Late-night comedy has always pushed boundaries. It's what people expect from us. Joan Rivers, Don Rickles, even Johnny Carson made jokes that might seem harsh by today's standards. Don't you dare compare yourself to Johnny Carson, Downey Jr. said, his composure cracking for the first time, revealing genuine anger underneath. Carson had class. He punched up, not down. He understood the difference between wit and cruelty. What you do isn't comedy, Jimmy. It's exploitation dressed up with a house band and a studio audience. Kimmel's jaw tightened, and for a moment his carefully constructed television personality slipped away, revealing something harder underneath. You know what, Robert? I've been doing this for 20 years. I've interviewed thousands of guests, and somehow you're the first one to show up on my show just to attack me personally. If you had such a problem with how I conduct my interviews, maybe you should have stayed home. There it is, Downey Jr. said, sitting back with a satisfied expression. The real Jimmy Kimmel, not the lovable everyman you play on television, but the person who thinks criticism equals personal attack, who believes that longevity in a position grants immunity from accountability. The tension in the studio was palpable now. Camera operators glanced nervously at their director, unsure whether they should keep rolling or cut to commercial. But this was live television, and the train had already left the station. You want to talk about accountability? Kimmel shot back, his famous smile completely gone now. Let's talk about your past, Robert. Let's talk about your arrest record, your drug problems, all the times you made headlines for the wrong reasons. At least I've been consistent. I haven't had to rebuild my entire public image from scratch. The low blow hung in the air, and for a moment it seemed like Kimmel might have found his footing, might have discovered a way to turn the tables on his accuser. But Downey Jr. didn't flinch. Instead, he nodded slowly, as if he had been expecting exactly this response. Thank you for proving my point so perfectly, Jimmy, he said quietly. When faced with legitimate criticism about your professional conduct, your immediate instinct is to weaponize personal trauma, to drag up someone's darkest moments and use them as an ammunition. You just demonstrated exactly the kind of person you are when the cameras are rolling and when you think no one is watching. Kimmel realized his mistake immediately, but it was too late. His attempt to gain the upper hand had backfired spectacularly, revealing the very character flaws that Downey Jr. had been pointing out. That's not what I meant to do. I was just trying to point out that we all have things in our past that we're not proud of. No, Jimmy, that's exactly what you meant to do, Downey Jr. replied, his voice carrying a weight of certainty that was impossible to argue with. You meant to hurt me, to embarrass me, to shift the focus away from your behavior and onto mine. The difference is, I've been honest about my struggles. I've taken responsibility for my mistakes, done the work to become a better person. You've spent 20 years hiding behind the excuse that cruelty is comedy, and when someone calls you on it, you immediately go for the jugular. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the usually supportive studio audience seemed stunned by what they were witnessing. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a reckoning, and it was happening in real time in front of millions of viewers. Kimmel looked around the studio as if searching for an escape route, his usual confidence completely shattered. The man, who had built his career on making others uncomfortable, now found himself in that exact position, and he clearly had no idea how to handle it. "I think maybe we should take a commercial break," he said weakly, looking toward his producers in the wings. "Absolutely not," Downey Jr. said firmly. "We're going to finish this conversation, Jimmy. Because this isn't just about you and me. This is about a culture that celebrates meanness, that rewards people for tearing others down, that treats human dignity as collateral damage in the pursuit of ratings and revenue." Kimmel stared at his guest, realizing that he had completely lost control of his own show. The man sitting across from him wasn't just an actor promoting a movie, he was someone on a mission. And that mission was to expose everything that was wrong with the entertainment industry, starting with Jimmy Kimmel himself. The studio remained frozen in uncomfortable silence as Downey Jr. pressed forward, his determination unwavering despite the obvious tension radiating from everyone around him. Kimmel sat trapped in his own chair, the host who had spent years controlling every aspect of his show now completely at the mercy of his guests' agenda. "You know what the real tragedy is, Jimmy?" Downey Jr. continued, his voice carrying the weight of years of observation and frustration. "You're actually intelligent. You're articulate. You have genuine comedic talent, and you've built an incredible platform. You could use all of that to elevate people, to celebrate human achievement, to bring out the best in your guests. Instead, you've chosen to become a merchant of humiliation." Kimmel's hands clenched in his lap, his knuckles white with tension. "That's not fair, Robert. I've done plenty of positive interviews. I've highlighted important causes. I've given platforms to people who needed them. You're cherry-picking examples to support your narrative." "Am I?" Downey Jr. reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone, holding it up for the cameras to see. "I had my assistant compile some statistics about your show over the past year. Do you want to know what we found?" The audience leaned forward collectively, sensing that something significant was about to be revealed. Kimmel's eyes darted toward his producers, clearly hoping for some kind of intervention, but they seemed as transfixed by the unfolding drama as everyone else. 67% of your celebrity interviews contain at least one segment designed to embarrass or mock the guest, Downey Jr. said, reading from his phone. 82% of your monologue jokes punch down at people with less power than you. And in the past 6 months alone, you've made 3 separate guests cry on air, each time treating their emotional distress as comedic gold. Kimmel's face flushed red, a combination of embarrassment and anger warring across his features. "Those numbers are meaningless without context. Comedy is subjective, and emotional reactions don't necessarily mean someone was hurt or offended." Context? Downey Jr. set his phone down and looked directly into the camera, speaking to the audience at home as much as to Kimmel. "Let me give you some context. Last month, you had a teenage singer on your show to perform her new song, instead of asking about her music, her inspiration, or her journey. You spent 15 minutes making jokes about her appearance, her age, and her accent. She was 17 years old, Jimmy. 17. And you turned her network television debut into a comedy roast." The audience stirred uncomfortably, some clearly remembering the interview Downey Jr. was referencing. Murmurs began to ripple through the studio as people recalled other instances where they had watched Kimmel's humor cross lines they hadn't fully recognized at the time. Kimmel tried to regain some composure, straightening in his chair and attempting to project authority. "I think you're being incredibly unfair here, Robert. You're taking isolated incidents and trying to paint them as representative of my entire career. Every comedian, every host has moments that don't age well." "Isolated incidents?" Downey Jr. laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Jimmy, this is your pattern. This is your brand. You've built your entire career on the premise that other people's discomfort is your entertainment. The problem isn't that you've had a few moments that didn't age well. The problem is that you refuse to acknowledge that what you're doing is harmful. The confrontation had reached a fever pitch, and everyone in the studio could feel it. This wasn't just a debate between two celebrities anymore. It was a referendum on the entire culture of late-night television, on the acceptable boundaries of humor, on the responsibility that comes with influence and power. Kimmel's mask finally slipped completely, revealing genuine anger underneath his television persona. You know what, Robert? I'm tired of this. You came on my show under false pretenses just to attack me personally. You've turned what should have been a promotional interview into some kind of public tribunal. If you have such a problem with late-night comedy, maybe you should start your own show and see how easy it is to fill 22 minutes every single night. There it is again, Downey Jr. said, his voice carrying a note of satisfaction. Deflection, defensiveness, and the classic move of making yourself the victim. You can't engage with the substance of what I'm saying because deep down, you know, I'm right. You know that what you do night after night causes real harm to real people, and instead of taking responsibility for that, you hide behind the excuse that entertainment is hard work. The studio audience was completely silent now, watching this unprecedented destruction of a television format in real time. Some looked uncomfortable, others appeared riveted, but all seemed to understand that they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. Kimmel made one last desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. I have a responsibility to my audience, to my network, to deliver content that people want to watch. If I spent every night doing soft interviews and positive puff pieces, nobody would tune in. And there's the real truth, Downey Jr. said, standing up from his chair for the first time during the interview. It's not about comedy. It's not about entertainment. It's not even about giving people what they want. It's about ratings. It's about revenue. It's about building your career on the backs of people who trusted you enough to sit in that chair and make themselves vulnerable. Kimmel remained seated, looking smaller somehow as Downey Jr. stood over him. Where are you going? We're not finished. Here. Actually, we are, Downey Jr. replied, straightening his jacket and looking directly into the main camera. I came here tonight to make a point, and I think I've made it. The question now is what everyone watching at home is going to do with this information. Are you going to continue supporting entertainment that derives its humor from human suffering? Are you going to keep rewarding hosts who treat their guests like props in their comedy routines? Or are you going to demand better? He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. The entertainment industry will only change when audiences demand that change. Jimmy Kimmel will only change his approach when there are consequences for his current approach, and those consequences start with you, the viewers, making conscious choices about what you watch and what you support. Kimmel sat frozen, clearly unsure whether to try to stop his guest from leaving or simply let the disaster play out to its conclusion. Robert, please sit down. Let's finish this conversation like adults. Downey Jr. turned back to face Kimmel. One final time. We are finished, Jimmy. I've said everything I came here to say. The only question left is whether you'll learn anything from this experience, or whether you'll go back to business as usual tomorrow night. With that, he walked off the stage, leaving Kimmel sitting alone at his desk, facing a studio full of stunned audience members and cameras that were still rolling. The host who had spent his career making others squirm now found himself in that exact position, with no script, no prepared jokes, and no way to undo what had just happened. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity before Kimmel finally managed to speak. Well, that was unexpected, he said weakly, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. I guess we'll be right back after these messages. But as the cameras finally cut away, everyone in that studio knew that nothing would ever be quite the same again. The comfortable boundaries of late-night television had been shattered, and the questions that Robert Downey Jr. had raised weren't going away anytime soon. So, what do you think? Was Robert Downey Jr. right to call out Jimmy Kimmel so publicly? Or did he go too far? Does late-night comedy need to change? Or is holding entertainers to these standards asking too much? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the moments that changed entertainment forever.